Hi, everyone. So excited to be here, especially with the collection that we have today. Some of the most wonderful people I've had an opportunity to get to meet, know, and trust. And we're bringing it to you today in full force. Chat's wide open. We all depend on chat to provide more relevance and, more importantly, great takeaways that you can actually apply and get value for your time and effort and resources today. With that, since it's the four of us, we're going to kind of move quick and start fresh. So, Kelly, you're the senior member of the group. Uh, what have you to say? And our keyword is authenticity. Love to hear your first thoughts.
Love it. And I'm senior by the amount of time I've been on lives. I just want to put it that way. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are tuning in from. And yes, what a fun day today. I love seeing all of us on the screen. The more the merrier. So great to be here. Authenticity. I mean, we chatted about it for a whole 120 seconds before we went live, very briefly. But authenticity is the best way to describe doing lives and how to be successful with lives. And I think it's probably one of the things that and I don't want to say learned, but it is about being able to be authentic in the present and not worrying about, hey, I'm not sure what I'm going to say. Somebody just asked me a question. I don't know how to answer. I lost my train of thought halfway through my sentence. All the things, and just being you. And I do believe that authenticity is one of those words that is overused and also misused, because I think people sometimes use it as an excuse to say things, and it's like, it's not really authenticity, because not all your thoughts need to be shared. Some of them should stay quiet. But I think it's such an important word and a fun one that we're going to have today. So I'll start with that.
Well, that's a great start, and I'll swing it over to Dave to get his first impression.
Well, Don, thank you. Kelly, Jason, it's always good to see all of us together. It's been fun in the past, so you can only imagine what today will bring. But, the word authenticity to me is become more and more important as I've engaged more and more with clients and how I can relate to them. And there are times when I don't have a good relationship or rapport, but I still have to maintain who I am, that authenticity of what I bring to the table to help them. I may not have the same experiences, but they're coming to me to solve some problem. And I have to be authentic in how I'm going to approach the problem they need solving. And at the same time, while I may not be able to relate to the situation directly, I can empathize. Empathy is a word that gets, just like Kelly said, authenticity gets thrown around a little bit too much and misused. But I think there's a connection between the two. If you can't be authentic, you're not going to be able to relate and ultimately empathize with your client or your friend or your family. So I'll start with that and leave there.
That's a great point. Must be your turn, Jason.
and I'll just complete the circle and say it's great to be here with all of you today. And thanks for the invite yesterday, Don, to join in. It's really exciting. And good morning, Carl. I see Carl's out there. Yeah, it's a great word, and it is to piggyback on kind of what's already been said. It's something that the reality to me is that it's being heart-centered. That's authentic. It's coming from your heart and having the win-win mentality. Truly. Yeah. Now, being authentic obviously means being authentic to yourself. And one of the definitions I found is being true to one's beliefs in every situation. And I want to talk about that in a next turn or so. But to Kelly's point, yeah, I deal with clients and we talk about, being honest, and sometimes being authentic and honest kind of kick in together. But sometimes people will say some horrible things. Say, well, I'm just being honest, or I'm just being authentic. Yes. And it's like, there's a difference between being honest or authentic and being a jerk. So, being heart-centered, I think, is the best way to look at it.
Yeah, I think all of you put together a great launch to this conversation. I think to key off of what Jason said, authentic is a two-way street. It's not just you and you, it's you and who you're with. and what kind of authentic is the best authentic to be, right? Because it's really relevant to who you're talking to, what the situation is, what the conditions are. So just having a totally unfiltered approach is very, very risky, you
Yes.
know, and being authentic is not to change the inauthentic to adjust to the situation, but how do people relate to you in a way that you supported and promoted through your approach of being authentic? And usually sharing a story is authentic, right? Because it's personalized, it's something you've lived, and it's something people want to hear, right? Some people think authentic is just to get stripped down and just be whatever they feel, whatever they think. That may allow for a lot of expression and freedom, but it depends on who you're with, how much people can accept, how fast can they accept it, and I think that goes a long way. So, Kelly, I know you've had a tremendous evolving journey, especially since we've connected and have done so many wonderful shows together. How have you become more authentic over time?
Gosh, I honestly think part of it is being like Jason just said or touched on is being comfortable with self and being self-accepting. I think not worrying about judgment of others. That was definitely, my initial fear of being on a live in general was like, oh, I'm tough, and I am. I've got thick skin. I've been through a lot, but I didn't want to be picked apart, and I was afraid of that, and getting through it, and then being like, and understanding, and I know this logically, but it's all about in practice. Anyone who passes judgment on us, it's about them. It's not about us. And also, this platform, LinkedIn specifically, has been a platform where there isn't that. It feels much more community based in the sense of people are supporting each other. I mean, I have not had negative comments, and I think that allows us, and with community, I want to swing that back around to that word, because when we have community, we feel safe, supported, and we're more apt to take risks that we normally wouldn't if we were just by ourselves and didn't have that around us. And that allows us to be able to be more ourselves and let down that wall. And I recently changed my headline on my profile to recovered corporate executive. And the reason being is I've had this conversation with quite a few people lately, is there was an evolution of, being laid off in 2020 from corporate America was a smack to my ego. It was a smack to my understanding of, holy mackerel, I was having so much of my identity wrapped up in my career, which is not who we are. I'm not a marketing executive or a CMO. I'm Kelly. And there was a sense of that stripping away and being like, oh my gosh, you don't realize how programmed you get to be in a certain way. And being on a live, it's like, you don't have to worry about, oh, am I going to say this correctly? Is this going to come across? Don't get me wrong, I'm careful with my words, but when you anyone who's been in corporate gets it, because you have to say things a certain way, you have to document things a certain way, and on LinkedIn and or posts with comments, you think about, how am I going to comment on this, and what do people want to hear, as opposed to, but what do I want to say? And I do think there's a fine line, which we've all hit on, between being authentic and genuine and real to yourself, as opposed to crossing a boundary, because it doesn't give you full range to just have no boundaries or no filter. Because like you said, Jason, it doesn't give you right to be rude or a jerk to someone and just say, I'm just being authentic. No, you're not. You're just being rude and you're being a jerk. So let's just call that what it is. But I do think it allows you to fall, or at least for me, it allowed me to really get back to who I am and the core of who I am, and finding my purpose through my voice and storytelling of others, and connecting with people on a human level, because everybody is so behind a keyboard and connecting and texting and not talking and connecting anymore. And that's a beautiful thing that for me has come out of it. And the relationships that have come, I could never have planned what happened just starting doing a LinkedIn Live January 19th, 2023, because it is a memorable date for me. And allowing yourself to be authentically you, that is a gift to yourself. And I think a lot of us didn't realize how corporate America did put a bit of a mask on us, and that we continued to carry it. So I'll leave it there this time.
I think that's great. Dave, I know you've made some transitions over time and had to be a different persona based on situation.
Yeah.
How is that journey gone?
Well, I tell you, I'm glad my internet connection came back first, because I caught Kelle right at the right time talking about the recovered, marketing executive, whatever, I forget your exact headline. And it just blasted in my head of, Jason, I hope can relate to this too, being in the military. You're not your authentic self. I mean, they strip us down from the very beginning. Haircut, dress, you're not, I don't want to say not human, but you're not yourself. You have to conform to a standard that they set for you. So it's very difficult for us to have a moment where we know where the line, doesn't blur anymore, so we can be ourselves. Because even when in the military, you go back home or you see your family, you're still, this identity becomes part of who you are. So to your point, Don, I mean, when I left the Navy 9 years ago, I still struggled with who it was I am. What is it to be authentic? Because for a long time, I was that guy. I'm just going to be honest. I'll just, I don't sugarcoat anything. But in the military, we could get away with a lot of that. I never played the quote, I hate the term, the political game, but I never played the touchy-feely game. So I didn't promote as high as I could have, because I was more honest and I was, more open about what was going on in my mind. And as I've, moved on from the Navy in the last 4 or 5 years, I've said, okay, how can I be me and relate, like I said in my opening, to my clients, to my friends, to my family, and really understand. It took me a while to say, okay, this is who I am. I'm a former naval officer. I'm an intelligence professional with cybersecurity background and a mental health advocate. These are things that I want to convey to the world, that, mental health is a part of my history. It doesn't define me, and yet I want to help people. And at the same time, I have a lot of experience with the intelligence and security worlds. How can I help people genuinely get to a better place? And, the authentic me, just from those two paths, is how do I want to help people and empathize with them, because I've been through a lot of their mental health journey, or I've been through their security journeys. I may not have been through some of the cases that I see in the private investigation world. I've never had a workers' comp claim, for example, but I can, at the same time, I can empathize with how somebody could feel when they're injured, out of work, not sure where, the family's going to be taken care of next. How can I empathize with them and be authentic and tell them what I think or feel when I can? There's some legal restrictions on the investigation side, but I still find a way to make myself true in my opinions to them.
That's terrific. Jason?
Some great points. And I want to go back kind of to what Kelle was talking about. And I think the word that I wrote down, the word I wrote down is trust. And I think trust is so important as we go through this conversation about being authentic, because to be your authentic self, you really have to trust who you're talking to, the community you're in. And that's this community here, that I trust, and I know that everyone has a mutual respect, and I love all of you. And I'll say that, and that might not be your cup of tea, but that's how I feel. That's my reality, is that it's all love. But that's so important, so I wanted to mention that trust is such an important part for us to feel comfortable in sharing our authentic self, because if we've all been in those environments, to Dave's point, we've all been in those environments where it wasn't the best sometimes to be your most authentic self, and then beyond that, how do we communicate that? How do we show up authentically, and how do we do it in a way that serves everyone? I am who I am, the Popeye syndrome. But when I work with clients, I have to respect that I'm there for them. I'm there to service them. And I'm not going to be my full self 100% because I'm there to support them. Now, at the same time, with that being said, as I go through my relationship with clients and that grows, and I see what's relevant to the conversation, so to speak, more of my authentic self shows up, and they respect that. I find that, whether it's, I might curse because they're cursing and it's just part of their dialogue and I might share curse, and trust me, I curse for the best of them. I am a professional, but I'm a Marine too. So, and that's my authentic self, is that I'm also that person. I am, I've talked about before, like I am, and what does that mean to you? And aren't you more than that? But we are all so much more. And being your authentic self 100% all the time. Like, we all have groups of friends that can't hang out with our other groups of friends. At least when we're younger, right? You're like, no, I can't bring this person with that person. But you love both of them and you're friends with both of them and you have a great relationships, but you don't bring them together. And that's the same thing with your authentic self. If you bring all your parts together of authenticity, it might be a jumble and it might not be relevant and you might not get your best results.
Yeah, those are great points. And, there's that saying, if you're not true to yourself, you could never be true to anybody else. So it all starts with yourself being aligned. The other element is authenticity is conditional, based on the situation, based on who you're dealing with. You can't be the same person to a 6-year-old as you can to a peer, right? You have to meet everybody at their level of understanding and appreciation. How much can they take? And just throwing it all out there creates more of a challenge. And I think the key word that came up is trust. How do you build trust with people so you can be more authentic? I mean, how many times growing up did you say, I can't tell my parents about this because I know what they'll think, I know what will happen, right? So it encourages you. And most of the time, you don't want to hurt their feelings. It's not just because of personal preservation. It's that they're from a different era. They see things differently. To just go out and say, here's what it is. And some people shock people and surprise people by doing that. And it actually reduces their authenticity in people's minds. Because the question is, oh, you were a fireman last week and now you want to be an acrobat this week, right? How authentic really are you if you change with the wind? And I think it's also allowing people around you to be their own authentic self, right? To encourage people to do and be who they are. Because at the end of the day, no matter what you measure, happiness should be the rule of thumb. And if it makes you happy, if you're satisfied with yourself, and sometimes the people you're with don't deserve you, and trying to fit in, trying to force your way or be an apple polisher, and you see that all the time in corporate America. All of a sudden somebody stands up and just mimics what the boss just said just to score some points with the boss, while you're really minimizing your value to everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think confidence goes a long way, because when you're confident that you are valuable, you do have worth, and if people don't appreciate it, you shouldn't have to keep trying to convince them. It should be just, okay, pick up on this, let's go from here. And really, that's why having a group of people who are all authentic with each other, because they trust each other. In most of the cases, it comes down to not having to judge too early.
Yeah.
And if you can take judgment away, the book's cover does not always determine the book's content. So Kelly, you've been fortunate to have interviewed and been on so many shows with people who are way authentic, and gives you inspiration to strive to become more authentic because you're seeing it in living color and in action. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what Jason said about trust. I mean, that's everything. You know, interviewing people or having a conversation with people, because of course we just like here, we don't script either on the Awesome Journey. But there's that whole thing about safety, because when people feel safe, they will share, and it's and I've honestly I've been that person I think my entire life, because if I've asked people, sometimes to my my dismay, well, tell me about yourself, and then all of a sudden it's like telling you everything, and it's like, whoa, that was a little much. I'm not sure I wanted all that, but it's that sense of safety and trust of when you're surrounded by someone, and I do think is an interviewer or someone being on the receiving end of a conversation, someone sharing their story. I feel there's a responsibility in holding that person and in letting them feel safe and supported and unjudged, because that's what we all want. I mean, it's that golden rule. I want to be treated the way that, or treat others as you wish to be treated. And it seems like it should be so simple, but it's a lost art for a big portion of folks for some reason, because they can't wait to put someone else down. And then I remember when it is the people judging, and I do preach this a lot, that it is about them. People who are acting out and doing the things, there's hurt going on inside. And there's a great, I can't remember who said this, but I have a feeling one of y'all will know, is your opinion of me is none of my business. And I think, which is a little bit different than feedback. I think feedback from people who are in your circle is very important, to be able to be like, hey, you're not being yourself. Like, what's up? Which could go in a totally different direction on this conversation altogether, because of mental health, because all four of us very much are involved in that space. And it is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month and PTSD Awareness Month. And I just think it's, see, look at that. I just lost my train of thought because I went to throw on those other facts. But I think it's our responsibility when we are engaging with someone else, if you are being authentic, to allow them their space to share and to speak. But I also think comes into that, and I'll leave this here because this will be a good one to toss over to Jason, is it's also a reminder that we need to be active listeners. We're too often in a place, and I do wish I learned this lesson way earlier in life, that listening is everything. There is so much you miss when you're sitting there planning and calculating, what am I going to say to that? Because you just said something, it's different than when we write a note during this conversation, like trust, I want to remember that. But you're not calculating what to say because too many things have happened before it comes back to you. And you have to be present and authentic. There is no other way really to participate in this conversation. And the four of us, as an example, totally trust each other and feel safe and know if one of us fumbled at all, that we would all be there to help one another. And what a beautiful thing. So I'll leave it there this time.
That is a beautiful thing. Dave?
Two words I wrote down, I think during your time, Don, was confidence and judgment. And they've come up since with Kelle there as well. And I think that as I watched, and she'll kill me for saying this, as my daughter over the last 6 months of her time in school and soccer and relationships with her friends is building up confidence. Don, Jason, and I, we were talking yesterday about faith and the taking the first step. The first step, and faith is taking the first step without saying the whole staircase. And just those little steps, those atomic habits. For example, you were talking earlier, Don, before we started, I think, those little steps that take us and build us and strengthen us and give us confidence, regardless of judgment, because we're self-aware and confident. I don't want to use the word confident. I'm trying to think of another word. to not care about someone else's judgment, because their opinion is theirs, not my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear this very often with not just my daughter, but with other nephews and nieces of, well, what will they think? I've said it many times as a kid and through my career. What will they think? Well, what will they think when I first got on here with you, Don?
Yeah.
And at some point you have to just realize, I don't care.
Yeah.
They're not me. They don't have to put their head on the pillow at the end of the night and go, I feel good about myself.
That's right.
And I think that is the word authenticity. I was thinking here in the last 5 minutes of social media is wonderful. It's a wonderful piece to share information, but we lose authenticity, which drives down confidence because we feel judged. And I say we, I think that goes from the, God help us, the single digit kid who's looking at it for some reason to the 80, 90-year-old who's looking at it. And we start, as we said yesterday with Jason and Don, was comparison is the greatest thief of joy.
Amen.
And if you can't be your authentic self, how do you know those around you are going to be authentic as well?
That's right.
I'll leave it at that.
Well, you left it a good point for Jason to pick it up and run with it. What's your thoughts, Jason?
I see we have some great comments in there too. I see Alan and Carl jumped in, so that's exciting and some great points. Yeah, it's just I'm kind of off track. I was reading those comments and kind of thinking about what they said, and but taking that first step in true and trust is so true. The thing about all of this though is the one thing I mentioned earlier about beliefs. Being true to your beliefs in every situation. Beliefs change.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think they don't change, this is an example that we use in NLP that I love. When you were 10 years old, you had a belief that you were 10 years old. Well, where's that belief now? Right? So with the very small, minimal, and we use that for placement and location of unthought beliefs, but that they do change.
Yeah.
And if you get so anchored into like, well, that's who I am. We talked about this yesterday about being consistent. And sometimes authenticity gets replaced by being, well, I want to be consistent. I have to be, that's who Jason is. And that's what Jason does.
Yeah.
And if you're not flexible, if you're not curious, if you're not willing to change your mindset, that could take you to some pretty bad places, or places that don't get you the best results. I should say, not bad places, but places that aren't going to get you the results that you truly want. And so realizing that you can change, I think that's the whole point that I want to make, is that you can change. And so when you're being authentic to who you were yesterday, that might not be being true to who you are today. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think adopting a we instead of a me mentality is so important, right? Because everybody can look back and say, I was just as ignorant as the person I'm talking to now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I'm at a different point. I've learned, they haven't. It's not a judgment. The other element is safety. Whenever you're safe with someone, you can let down your guard. You don't have to keep thinking, where's the challenge? When is the next shoe going to drop? And I think Kelle made a good point. There's a saying, you're the factor of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Your authenticity will be determined by their support. You could be as confident as ever, and if the first 3 people come up to you and say, that's the worst outfit I ever saw someone wear, it makes you self-conscious, it makes you self-aware, and you start to want to change, which could be a divergence from your authentic self. And it's knowing who you are, believing in who you are, and knowing what you do. And nobody's perfect. And I think when you get rid of perfection, you can grow your authenticity. And at a certain point, habits over time give you that confidence. Hardly ever do you get into your car and really pray the car's going to start. You just assume it, right? When you hit the gas, you just assume it's going to go faster. With first time, you don't know what's going to happen. You're kind of freaked out when anything does happen. You surprise yourself. And I think habits need to be fortified. need to continue to be developed? You know, are you constantly trying to learn? Are you always, you know, I had a saying, always happy, never satisfied. You know, so wherever I'm at, that's where I'm at. That's what I should enjoy. Whatever I've had, I should consider it a blessing and something that just doesn't come to me naturally. And I think back to our comments, Alan has a comment here. People have never lacked affection. Great. What about those that are self sufficient and resilient out of necessity? Avoiding the great hurt helps when you are together. Never having to question those things makes us wobbly. Carl comes back with, how would you describe an accomplished listener?
Mm.
Someone who will hear with nuance and optimize the value of any feedback. And that is so important because,
Yes.
you know, that other saying, the more people you can help become successful, the more successful you'll become. Right? And you can't do it alone. And if you could, it's lonely.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, people are social and human beings. They want to be regarded in a positive way. And you got to ask yourself, did I leave the person or the situation better than I found it? Was an asset to whoever it is I was with? And will people remember me for that and want to engage? You know, positive reinforcement goes a long way towards continuation of a quality habit. You know, if no one ever thanks you, if nobody ever acknowledges you, and I know Kelly made the point that she was in meetings that in advance they said, we don't want you talking here.
Yeah.
You know, we just want you being seen here or
Mhm.
supporting what we're saying. And that is such a counterproductive
Demeaning.
way, yeah, of treating someone because it's like, you don't want me, I don't want to be here either.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for getting paid, I'd probably be out the door right now.
Mhm.
Right? So I mean that's important. Uh, Alan has a couple comments. A genius that lacked affection isn't. I know how it feels to be blackballed. Now I need that void to be filled. And group dynamics all reviled. Alpha always has his lieutenants. Recently, in a time of crisis, I've been blessed by 10 plus men, a blessing I'll always remember. Um, you know, and I think knowing that everybody is a work in progress, knowing that whatever has been accomplished can't sustain the future, right? The past will always maybe support the future, but doesn't have to define the future. And freedom of movement, freedom of thought, freedom of action, especially on a platform like LinkedIn, you got a billion people here. Why try to fix anybody? Why try to adjust yourself to someone because you're not going to be respected? You may be accepted in the group because you support and you do this and you're just a nice person. And I also think that being a good person is the key.
Mhm.
You know, in every situation, showing a little kindness, showing a little empathy. And to Carol's point, describing an accomplished listener is someone who cares about what you have to say and is willing to listen to it before you end saying it.
Mhm.
Because so many people want to guess the puzzle before they got enough vowels. Oh, I know what your deal is now. You know, someone just started talking.
Oh
Well,
gosh.
you need to do this, and here's how you do it, and here's why you do it, and you should thank me right now or thank me even more later for helping you. Uh, that isn't something that's going to be respected or regarded, and you only have one chance to make a first impression, right? How do you walk into a room? How do you shake someone's hand? How do you make them feel happy to be there? Because most people are just like you in those situations. You walk into a room of strangers, there's some anxiety. There's some questions, you know, and it takes you a while to acclimate. So Kelly, you
Ooh,
know,
so much in that. So much in that round that I can pick up. One of them, though, that I wanted to be sure today, because today is the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and I just want to say God bless all of those that have fallen for us to be sitting here today and having this conversation openly and widely, and to all of our military out there, first responders. God bless you all, and thank you all for your service. I wanted to be sure that that didn't go without being said today. And then to piggyback off of what y'all were saying, excuse me, with corporate America. Yes, I was literally at global boardroom meetings, and I was told I was to be seen and not heard. And you don't realize over time, and over time I did get quiet, but then there were times when I did speak up, and then it was sort of like, I would get a talking to afterwards, like, Kelly, you were right, but sort of situation. And I don't think I realized how many of those things, because of my domestic violence background and recovering from that, how many of those things were actually triggers for me ongoing, because it's toxic. You're telling me to not be me. You're telling me to be inauthentic, and to be what you want me to be in front of who you want me to be as in front of, if you will. I don't think I said that correctly, but I think y'all know what I mean. And being able to recover from that, to be like, I don't need to edit myself for anyone, and not realizing, and I've had a lot of conversations with people who are going through and have been going through the transition from corporate America. And I jokingly do say now, but I mean it seriously, because I was like, I'm pretty sure if I went back to corporate America now, I'd probably get fired, because I wouldn't keep my mouth shut. and not because I'm defiant or that I'm a person that likes confrontation in any way. It's just, I would be authentic to myself. You're not going to talk down. And I've always been a leader too. I've never raised my voice, because as a woman, you had a choice to take a path. And it was, if you want to be a leader, it was, you need to be more male-esque. And for whatever reason, I never understood why that, and excuse me, but how it transferred into a woman being a bitch. Like, I never understood that. And I never wanted to be that. I'm like, I still wanted to be authentically who I am. I'm not going to become this person that I have no respect for when I would see it. So in that part I did, and would always, choose my words kindly and have hard conversations with thinking about which words to use first, because you can have very hard conversation with people and make them feel, and I don't want to say good, but safe and secure, and that you care, that you have empathy and compassion coming towards them. I've terminated people who hugged me afterwards and said, thank you so much for the respect. Because it's all about words. You could say, hey man, you've had every opportunity, you've screwed them all up, talk to HR, ciao. And how that would make them feel, as opposed to, gosh, here we sit today, and I know you're not surprised being here, and we're gonna go through a few things, go over how we got here. You know what I mean? There's a difference about how you choose your words, your cadence, all the things. But it ultimately is because you're coming from a place of empathy and compassion. Feel what it would feel like for that person. Guess what? Even though they know internally they earned this meeting because they've had every opportunity to change and they didn't make the shift to get back on the right track. They know why they're sitting here. They still have to go home and tell someone that they got fired. And that feels like crap. And so having that empathy, because you never know when that's going to be you someday. I don't want to be that person, but if I am, I want to treat that person as the way I want to be treated when it happens. And really, to wrap up, because I've been on the corporate America part on this, on authenticity, it really is astonishing to me because, 2020 was when I was laid off, but I was still working for someone at that time who was not a good human and did have a demeaning, I was a woman, I was a second-class citizen. So I was already looking for another job. So when I got laid off, it wasn't like I was already one foot out the door anyways, but then I couldn't get hired. So that's a whole different story. But so many of these things continue to happen, but I think we all just forget. And one more point I want to make before I toss it is because Jason's thing about belief, because I do think our beliefs change over time. And if they don't, you kind of need to take a look in the mirror. Because I believe, and this is another thing about LinkedIn Lives and my show, the conversations I've had with so many people, And listening to their journeys and their paths and how it's gone, it's made me go like, oh my gosh, like I never thought about that way. And it opens your eyes when you really listen to other people. And I think it's a shame in the world right now that there's too many people that are like, if you don't agree with me 100% on this, you're wrong and we can't be friends. And it's like, it's such a crime because you're missing opportunity to learn from one another. We're not defined as individuals by one box that we check. Like that to me is sad and it's a shame. And I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's so valuable and so important, Kelly. Dave?
Yeah, I think you guys see me taking notes every so often here. And earlier I wrote, there's a difference between being honest and being respectful, being sincere. And to your point, Kelly, I mean, I can be brutally honest to your point earlier too, Don, about telling someone they look good or bad in a dress.
Yeah.
But you look like a sack of potatoes. Well, that's not really respectful. It may be honest.
Doesn't make it right.
It could be right, but it doesn't make it nice. And, I think LinkedIn and LinkedIn Lives, or LinkedIn in particular, like all social media, are great things for connection. But like I said earlier, they've taken away for some authenticity unless you're willing to put in the work. There's two pieces of work I'm looking at here. One, if you're willing to make a connection with somebody beyond just having likes, having connections for numbers. Yeah. Oh, well, Kim Kardashian has 10 million followers. I don't care. She has no connection with 10 million people. Yeah. Okay. But having a relationship with and having a connection to, like we've said several times here, we know each other, we trust each other, we love each other, we've been on multiple shows, we can understand where we're coming from. The second piece is doing the work. And by work, I mean going internally, to your point, Kelly, and knowing that how would I want to be treated? Am I the person that I want to be? And if not, why not? What do I have to do to change? Like you said too, Jason, our beliefs change, but our internal clock, our internal assessments need to change as well.
Yeah.
Look, I will never go into the future going, I was the ideal, perfect U.S. Navy officer and the best cryptologist I could be. I was an ass to many, many people at times, not completely all the time, but situationally dependent. Am I in a combat zone? Am I in a in extremis situation? Is something really critical and you're taking your time? I could be an ass, no doubt. Were there times when I didn't need to be an ass and I was? Yes. And I can honestly tell you, I 90% of the time went back and looked in the mirror and said, what were you doing? Why are you doing this? But I was never honest with myself until just before COVID of what were the triggers? What were the mental health issues? What was really going on? Yeah. No matter my ups and downs with depression and getting treatment, I never got specifically honest about those triggers and what the causes were. And that affected how I related to people. And I wasn't being an authentic Dave Snell. I was being what I thought I had to be to respond to situations based on my past.
Yeah.
And that's the God's honest truth. And I have gone back and I've had one shipmate in particular. I won't mention him by name. I've known him for 28 years now. And about 3 years ago, we were sitting at a pub and I said, Dave, well, I just gave some of it away. Dave, I apologize for the way I was. I apologize for these things that I remember that I did. Some things I don't recall because we just block things out through a series of connections. But okay, well, that strengthened our relationship because I did the work. And his honest response was, oh, I just took that as part of who you were. And I'm okay with who you are. And it wasn't that he's an ass too. But he recognized there was something triggering that I responded the way I did.
Yeah.
And it takes that self-reflection of understanding. And the second one I'll say, in the Philippines, there was a young lady there, she was a lieutenant, JG, I think at the time. She's now a commander. Made a great deal of success. She's got her own podcast, and I was on her podcast. And I said, "Hey, I don't know if it was during the podcast or before." I said, "Look, I apologize for the way I was. I'm not going to make excuses for it, but I'm sorry that I made you feel that way." And it has strengthened our relationship and our connection with posts and likes for what they're worth. But she knows that I'm there to support her because I learned who I am through self-reflection and deepening my connections with people beyond a surface level area.
Oh yeah, that's so important and so nice of a share. So, Jason, seems like this is opening up all of us.
Yeah, and to speak to to what Dave and Kelly just said, and to talk about being open in stories, I think the biggest block to being authentic, drum roll please, is trying to be authentic.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
When you are trying to be, well, this is who I'm supposed to be, and this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is how I should be, and that conflict between who you truly are and who this, it's like, I use the example of saying the difference between thinking I want to move my arm and moving my arm is the knowing. I know I'm going to move my arm. I think, I think, Don, you talked about starting the car earlier as an example, and it's like you get in and you know it's going to start. And I use that example because it's like we have this, well, I think I should be this way, and I think I'm supposed to act like this. And Dave, in the military, you probably thought that you were being authentic, like how you had to be to get the job done. And Kelly, in corporate America, you thought you probably, and I'm not speaking for either of you, but you think that, I have to be this way to try to fit in and to get my job done. And and you're not being truly authentic. It's that core. It's the cutting the onion, getting all those layers off to getting to that core, whatever fruit, vegetable you want to talk about. But I think that conflict is the biggest thing that stops us from truly being ourselves. And that's what I went through for a lot of years, is conflicted about, people don't want to see me show up the way I truly am, and people won't accept me for who I am. And, and that's been my struggle. And I think that's a lot of our struggles is finding that. And I want to make one little silly point because it just comes up, and I love this quote. And going back to, we're talking about corporate America, and not everyone's an entrepreneur, not everyone has their own business. We have to have jobs, we have to pay bills. There's that reality. And you have to adjust. There are some adjustment that goes on. If you work for someone else, that's just the reality of it. You can still be true to yourself, though, in the way that you do it. I think that's the key. Mm-hmm. And within that, there's, we could all get different results doing the same results doing different things. And the silly quote I want to share is, if you're in any relationship and you're both the exact same, one of you is redundant. So whether it's work or relationships, so be your true self, and get results in your life, or whether it's work, personal, the way that you get those results.
That's good.
Quick, Don, is
sure.
I pointed at my other screen here while you're talking, Jason. I've got Brene Brown up. It says authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are.
Amen. Love that.
That's a beautiful quote. And what comes to mind is what's really important relative to your authenticity, because 98% of everything is tomato, potato, potato, right? And and who are you to decide, oh, that hat is pretty and I'm going to share that with you, or I hate that hat and I'm going to share that with you. It's not relevant, and you're far from being a fashion judge or anybody else, but it's the 2 or 3% that says, hey, this is where authenticity really fits. And I think giving people more leeway, being more accepting, believing in the best, even though you have no reason to or justify it. And I think, the quote you made, Jason, is people warm up to people who are warming up first, and not making excuses or saying what you have to say without a caveat after. They always say whenever you use but, you can diminish or dismiss everything before it.
Or when people start with, when people start at that, and we probably all have had this, the email or the phrase, and they start up with, I don't mean to be an asshole, but, and it's like, well, thank you
With all
for
due respect.
now I know exactly what to expect.
Well, it's that backhanded compliment, it's that, hey, you look really good, but if you could change this, you'd really be great, and, halfway is no way, and unless you're willing to go to distance, unless you're willing to start something and see the result, why bother? Because all you do is bring mystery and questions. And especially if people, you have a higher responsibility if people know, like, and trust you. It's not just getting there, it's sustaining and building on it and being authentic, but also choosing words that show respect, that honor people, that appreciate this, and, finding things that people don't see in themselves. So it's not really correcting bad activity, it's identifying, you're the person I always think about when it comes to generosity, or you're the person I'm always aware of when it comes to being punctual, and sometimes, you don't know how people see you until they share that, and all of a sudden say, confirmed, validated. And all of a sudden, that person becomes special because maybe they took you from being on the fence to taking a position or to moving forward. Because I think ultimately that's the goal, because I think we all know that life changes, people change. What worked before doesn't work now for no reason, but things have changed. It's, and I think finding fault, making an excuse, I'm going to leave you because of what you did. No, you're leaving me because of what you think and feel now, right? Because when I used to do it, everything was fine, and now it's not. And I believe one other element is consistency, to stay authentic, and they even say raising kids or anything. It doesn't matter if you're a heavy disciplinarian or a very liberal approach, but make sure the kid doesn't get confused every day, right? If they break a window playing baseball and nothing happens, versus, hey, you're in your room for a week. And do you want to even take a chance that you put somebody over the edge without knowing it? Because you don't know where someone's sitting right now. They could be at the end of their rope, and all it takes is somebody to say something unknowingly, and all of a sudden it's a setback. I believe this can be a much kinder world if we all act with more kindness.
Amen.
Right? It's not the world, it's not the this. And why not? And I think it's a hard concept for people. Be the better person in every situation. Feel okay about letting someone in the line who has one item and you're sitting there with a basket full of stuff. Or see some lady who can hardly lift the groceries into her trunk and move over there and say, please let me help you out. Because we all are where we are because of the shoulders that we stand on who came before us. If we're talking about D-Day, I mean, it was such a sacrifice for so many people. My dad was a World War II vet who actually was wounded, and my neighbor was on Normandy and got shot up 3 times and had to lay on the beach for 2 days acting dead before he could get help. And as soon as he came back, he went back in and got shot again.
Oh my gosh.
But, it just showed the character of somebody. And he ended up going on to be one of the nation's best landscapers. He did the Arch in St. Louis. He did the Washington Monument, created all that. And the challenge was living next to a guy who would be out there with a magnifying glass cutting a weed. and trying to measure up to Bob. So, it's the inspiration that people have. And you say, wow, what that person went through voluntarily. They took the initiative to get back into the game. And if they can do it, maybe I can do a little bit of it. And I think that's so important. So, Kelly, this coming up on top of the hour.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts now based on all of our thoughts?
I mean, let's just be honest. We could all talk for another like 2 or 3 hours on this topic easily. So many great things. I don't even know where to take of all of that you just encapsulated. Your story of your uncle is incredible. I was born in St. Louis. I've been in the Arch. Incredible. Um, but and because I can't help but think now of our service members and how they were back then, because it was a pride. They were proud to be going on those boats and knowing that they likely were coming home. And it makes me sad for where we sit today. But that's a different conversation. So yeah, authenticity. I will just wrap up a great conversation. Again, I could talk to y'all for days for sure. Is just remember to being true to you is one, it's easy. Like if whoever's judging you, it's on them, it's not you. And you will find such joy because it is exhausting trying to be someone else or who you think the world wants you to be. I know no person who has gotten to a place in their life where they're like, man, I finally let my mask down. I wish I would have waited another day before I got to be true me and really love who I am. Because the impact that you make when you're in that space is so much greater than when you're trying to be what you think the world wants you to be. Because authenticity is one of those intangibles that we can't put a price tag on, we can't put a feeler on, we can't do anything, but people are drawn to it. And things will come to you in this world so much more different than when you're trying to, again, be what you think the world wants to be. And there is a ripple effect that goes on so far beyond you, again, that's immeasurable. And so I will end on this too, because I always do, is it is one of those things that it is. When you go out and shine so bright, others can't help but shine too.
Yeah, and I always love that quote, and I've heard it so many times and always enjoy hearing it again. So, Kelly's a prime example of embodying the interviews she's had, the conversations with people. I know I'm a better person because other people have showed they're better person to me. And I decided, hey, that's a better situation and persona than I have. And if they can do it, I can try to do it. And if I can't accomplish it, maybe they can help me a little bit more so I can help somebody else. It's all about paying it forward. And life is so short. It's what you leave behind that makes the difference. How people remember you for the little things you might have done that might have turned a corner for them. And the other thing is having a support group.
Yeah.
I know my kids and my grandkids are always happy to see me, right? And I always have a safe refuge. And I know Anne, she's always been the best when things were the worst, that always believed, hey, you're better than this. You'll even find this to be a better opportunity. You don't see it now, but it'll happen. And once you get that in your mind and say, could be right, or maybe you are right, things start changing. And all of a sudden, to Kelly's point, I got to know real early on the founders of Home Depot when they were just starting out. And I was actually at conferences every year with not Bernie Marcus, but his partner, I'll remember him, Arthur Blank. And he's actually now the owner of the Atlantic Falcons. And their whole key was they got fired the same day from Handy Andy because no one wanted to hear their belief in this new concept. And they thanked that person every day because if they wouldn't have fired him, they wouldn't have had the opportunity. So, Dave, what's your thoughts?
I will just end on a follow-up from your previous round of, being nice to people and respectful and honest with them. But think what you will of Disney today, the old classics are still wonderful. And Thumper's great line of, if you ain't got nothing good to say, nice to say, don't say nothing at all. I'll leave it at that.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah.
Well, that's terrific. And Jason?
So the one thing that I want to leave is compassion, self-compassion, and be your true self and be your authentic self. The quote, it's attributed to Einstein, but they're saying it's not. And that's one of those things. Anyway, it's a great quote either way. Wherever it comes from, the sentiment is great. It says, everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid.
Oh, I love that.
Don't look for things that you're not. Look for who you are.
Yes.
Have that belief in yourself and be yourself.
That is so beautiful. And I think to close out, it's the little things over time that make the big difference. You know, it's taking time to be in the moment and appreciating what a beautiful day it is, how the birds are singing, how your food is a blessing to have. I mean, it's being grounded, showing humility, knowing but the grace of God, that's where you'll be, right? If you look at somebody and how things change so quickly. And I think that's important. Is we always talk about gratitude, counting your blessings, waking up in the morning and getting yourself right before you go out there. And it could be meditation, exercise, a zillion things. And at the end of the day, being thankful for that day, because every day of life is a blessing that not everybody gets, right? And if you're in the game, you're a player, right? Now it's up to you to determine how you want to play and how you want other players to view you. So with that said, I think this is a beautiful conversation. It confirms that more is merrier and better, especially when everybody is in the mode of how do I congratulate somebody for something they just said that is meaningful to me, and then how do I promote them by acknowledging what they just said. So it's really kind of a love fest, if you can put it that way. And this format allows that. So I want to thank everybody. Next week, we've got a great schedule ahead. We've got Todd DeWitt coming back with Carl on Monday.
Nice.
Beverly is with Kathy, who's just a wonderful lady that has formed this group, the Golden Something for Women Over 50. Wednesday is Carl. And next week, we've got Kelly and Omar joining us. So that should be a fun day. So with that said, Kelly, Dave, Jason, always a pleasure. Always a great start to my day. And look forward to more continuing opportunities like this to help each other, help others.
That's great. Thank